Previously on Unscripted.
So the fact that they were comparing it to the All-Star game, that bothered me a lot.
When you're talking about that the players actually care, this is not a bold prediction. I think that the Canada-USA game is going to be a war.
You're listening to Unscripted with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, Skip, so today we're going to talk about the television series The Sticky, which was on Amazon Prime. But before we get to that, last time we recorded an episode 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Four Nations face-off. And a lot has happened since we recorded, because there had only been one game played in the tournament when we recorded our last episode. But now the tournament's over, as everyone knows. And congratulations to Canada. We won.
Yes, we won. Thank the Lord. It was really an amazing game, honestly, and an amazing tournament to watch. It was like the gift that the NHL gave us in February that we didn't know we needed at the time, but looking back, we really did need it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we always want Canada to win, and luckily for us, when it comes to hockey, Canada usually wins these things, but this was a very close tournament. We had recorded our episode on a Saturday morning, and that night, Canada was playing USA in Montreal at the Bell Center, and we didn't know, of course, the outcome of the game at the time, but it ended up being a crazy game, and we lost, unfortunately. But if you're going to lose, it's okay to lose in the round robin portion of the tournament.
Well, Canada's shown that before, right? This whole tournament, well, I mean, not the tournament. I mean, it's only 4 teams, but kind of went according to the normal script, right? We lose to the USA in the round robin, and then we beat them in the final, but in a super close game, right? Like, the Canada-USA hockey rivalry is real. Forget about the politics. Forget about their moronic president and all this 51st state bullshit. But like, the Canada-USA hockey rivalry is real, regardless of politics. These guys don't necessarily like each other when they get on the ice. They're playing for their country, both teams, and it went like I said, it went according to the script, which is Canada's best players show up when they need to, and we squeak out a win. And they come up short. They come up short. It's a big part of the narrative, that they don't get it done, and we do.
I don't think the tournament could have been any closer. So the first time Canada played USA, the final score was 3-1, but there was an empty net goal. So it was really a 1-goal game. And then the second time Canada played USA, it went into overtime. So it doesn't get any closer than that. So obviously the two countries are very evenly matched.
But it's not just that. We're talking about 1 goal either way, and you could have Sweden in the final. You could have Finland in the final. Like, all 4 teams are very, very close. Throw in Russia and the Czech Republic. I'm already telling you that whenever they do this tournament next, it's going to be the 6-nation showdown. This is my prediction already. Like, I'm going ahead. But, I mean, international hockey is great, honestly. It's like I told you last time, when I watched that Canada Sweden, like that first game, it's like I'm watching the sport new. I'm watching a new sport that I haven't seen in forever. Well, in 9 years, it turns out, right? Like, the best on best brings out the best on best. It's the most skilled players, the best players. It's fast. It's passing. There was in the gold medal game. Well, I want to call it the gold medal game. In the championship game, there was 1 penalty, I think. Right?
I think there was only 1 penalty, and it was like a blatant, obvious penalty. Like, the ref had to call it.
Yeah, but just because there's 1 penalty doesn't mean there was no physicality. That was a war. That was a very physical game, mostly initiated by the U.S. I think Canada tried to play a more skilled game, and U.S. tried to muck it up. That's what they thought was their advantage, which I actually think it was their disadvantage, honestly, because I think they got so obsessed with punishing Canada and being physical and hard, and they didn't score goals. That's it.
I'm glad you mentioned Sweden and Finland, and I should not forget about them, because actually, when you look back at the tournament as a whole, Canada was kind of lucky to make it to the championship game, because yes, they did beat Finland, but they almost blew it at the end, if you recall. And yes, they did beat Sweden, but that game went into overtime, and there was a play just before Canada scored where Sweden almost went on a breakaway, and could have won that game easily.
Yeah,
So
that's what
and
I'm
then
saying.
and then Canada lost to the USA. So really, up until the last game of the tournament, Canada didn't play that great.
In every championship, in every sport, in every championship, basketball, football, hockey, whatever, the margin of victory is very small. You can look back at every winning, except for dominating, there's dominating games, but in every championship, the team that wins the championship is often one play away from losing, right? Even in
100%.
an earlier round, in the final game, but no one remembers the losers. like what's that podcast that we used to listen to? Flags Fly Forever, right?
Yeah, that was a fantasy baseball podcast.
Right. Flags Fly Forever. So that's what we got. I think the NHL got really lucky with this thing. I don't think they knew. They kind of fell into how good the tournament was. They planned this a year ago. They didn't know that Trump was going to threaten the sovereignty of their neighbor, right? They didn't know about all this stuff like that these circumstances could happen. Because when was the last time Canada played? About like the other tournaments that we had, which was like the World Cup, or wasn't there tournaments that happened like before the season started? Let's say September.
Yeah, but I mean, the last one I think was in 2016. That was the World Cup of hockey, and that included the Young Guns team and Team Europe.
Right. But when Canada played USA in that tournament, it wasn't a war like this.
No, I don't recall it being like this at all. So
really very easily, the four nations face-off could have had the level of intensity that those games had, which was like so, honestly. But I think there's just a bunch of circumstances, and it's not just the politics that led to it. It's everything. The players want it too, right? Like there's a lot of, I think Canada did a good job of just blocking out all the nonsense. I think they wanted to win because they wanted to win, and they're not going to come out and say publicly we wanted to win because the other team's president's threatening our country. Like then no one came out and said that. Maybe they're thinking it. I don't know. But
yeah, it was great bulletin board material for us.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to read you one quote because your favorite player, Brad Marchand, actually had one of the best after-game quotes after the final game. He said that he thinks that sports and politics shouldn't mix, and you play the sport for the sport, and one thing shouldn't have to do with the other. And I think that's mostly what the Canadian players felt. But he said about the Tkachuk brothers specifically, they play their game. They do what they do. Sometimes when you shoot your mouth off in the media, it bites you. You can do that during the season, but you're playing best on best. It's different, and they got a little bit ahead of themselves. He was trying to be nice to them at the end, but basically he said, like what you just said, they gave Canada all the bulletin board material they needed. Like if there was ever a tournament or a final game that had bulletin board material, it was this one, right? You literally had tweets from the president talking about it, So it's what it is.
And you notice that Matthew Tkachuk didn't play at all in the third period and I think half of the second period. And you never know. He may have gotten injured during that fight that he started. His idea backfired on him.
Well, exactly. I mean, yeah, you don't know how he got injured, but he seemed to be questionable before the game. I remember like he didn't do the morning skate and they weren't sure. But yeah, I don't know. I think the physicality backfired him. I think they tried to do WWE instead of playing hockey. And when you play hockey, you score goals. And when you do WWE, you get in fights, right?
And the first time Canada played USA, when the Americans started those 3 fights in 9 seconds, if anything, that gave juice to Canada. So, that didn't. Yeah. I don't think that helped the United States because Canada actually scored the first goal in that game.
There's only one thing, and then we're going to go talk about the sticky. All of Canada, including me and including you, owes a big apology to the goalie, Jordan Binnington. Because we talked about this even way, way before, months and months and months ago. Who's going to be Canada's goalie? Canada doesn't have any good goalies. Our goalies suck. And I thought they did suck. And I thought the U.S. advantage was in net, not on the rest of the players, but in net they had a definite advantage. And Binnington, he let in some bad goals in the tournament, but in that third period and that overtime of that final game, he saved their ass. right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, you've seen goalies get hot for a game or a period. You've seen it before in the NHL, even in international hockey. And he got hot at the time that he needed to get hot.
Yes. Yeah, certainly. But he got hot like really, really quickly. Like like that overtime kicked in, and then next thing you know, he made 2 game-saving saves, and then 2 minutes later, McDavid scored, and it's game over, right? So
it was interesting. They did the 3 stars as they do every game, and he was the second star, and I thought he could have been the first star.
Yep, definitely agree with that.
Okay, we'll be right back after this to talk about the sticky.
You're listening to Unscripted.
I'm Joseph DeMedictis.
And I'm Ross Citrillo.
And we're doing this podcast so we don't have to go home and get a real job.
Exactly.
That's right. And we're doing it to tell you about our pursuit of the dreams we've had since being a kid, being young, trying to get into the entertainment industry. We're mid-career, sort of. We're kind of halfway broken in a way. But we both have these big dreams and big goals.
Aspirations, really.
For our careers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. This podcast is about the journey through the industry, trying to make it, but trying not to have to give up.
So listen to our podcast on all the places you might listen to a podcast. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We have our own YouTube channel where you can watch the video version. All the links can be found at you'llnevermakeit.ca. Here's hoping we do.
And now, back to Unscripted.
Okay, Skip, we're back.
All right, so today we're going to talk about the Amazon Prime show called The Sticky. And as usual, everything from here on out is spoilers. Every single word we're going to say. The premise of the show is interesting because I saw the commercials and I'm like, what is this exactly? And I actually had no intention of watching it. I was like, this looks absolutely stupid. And then I kept seeing the commercials. I was like, hey, wait a minute. So then I started looking up like what the show is about. So, it's about like a farmer, a syrup farmer who like turns to a life of crime, and then she teams up with like a mob guy and a security guard to steal a bunch of maple syrup. And when I realized that the show was actually filmed in Quebec and about like literally like a Quebec story, I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a try, right? Like, I'm going to see what this is all about. Only because of, like, I wanted to see, like, what is this about? Like, this is in my backyard, Like, so, yeah, that's a show. But I didn't love it. Like, I'll just tell you off the bat, I didn't love it. And when we text back and forth about like sometimes when we want to do a TV show, I was like, well, I didn't like the Sticky that much. And you were like, that's okay. You're allowed to talk. We're allowed to talk about a show that you didn't like that much. Now I didn't hate it. I don't want to tell you that it's awful and don't watch it, But I think it's just like okay. It has some funny moments, but overall, it's kind of stupid. To be perfectly blunt.
Right. So the first time I heard about the show, I was actually watching a hockey game. Because, Amazon Prime, they do Monday Night Hockey. And
right.
So the Canadians had a game on Amazon Prime, and I was watching it because that's one of the few Montreal games that I'm allowed to watch in this region, by the way.
Right.
So during the intermission, I think it was Andy Petrillo that was interviewing the main character of the show. The actor is Guillaume Cyr. In the show, he's called Rémi Bouchard.
Right.
So he was being interviewed during the intermission because apparently he's a big Montreal Canadiens fan. And she asked him about the show because it was just about to be released on Amazon Prime. So they were promoting it. And so just from that little interview, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to watch the show. Like, it doesn't really resonate with me. So I didn't even think about it. Then about a week later, a friend of mine asked me, it might have been you, I don't know. A friend of mine asked me, have you watched the show The Sticky? And I'm like, no, I haven't. What's it about? Like, am I missing something? Is this show like really great that I should watch it? And this particular friend said I should watch it. They didn't say it was really great, but they said I should watch it. Mm-hmm. But again, I still didn't. Then like a week after that, someone else asked me about the show. So I'm like, this is like the third time I'm hearing about it from a third different source. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Like you said, because it was filmed in Quebec and whatever. I'll give it a shot. Plus, I do love maple syrup, actually. So like I'll watch it. How, what is it? 6 episodes and they're like 30 minutes each. Like it's not a huge time commitment. So
Oh no, you can watch this. You can watch this in one afternoon. Like
Right.
honestly,
in fact, after watching the whole series, it could have just been like a 90-minute movie.
oh my god, I wrote down the exact same thing. They could have. I think it could have been a much better movie than the way they broke it down into little episodes. I think it could have been a better movie. Yeah.
The only thing is, because the last episode ends with all these cliffhangers, I have a feeling there might be a second season.
Well, there has to be a second season. There doesn't have to. Like, they're not going to make anything that's not going to make money. But like, in terms of the story, there has to be a second season because there's literally no resolution at all. But it made me think that when I watched this, it gave me the feeling that they may have changed the last episode because from how it was originally written, knowing that there was going to be a second season. Like, I don't know if that's true or not, but like, I get that feeling that that's kind of what happened, right? They started off with one premise and then they realized it's going to be season 2. So they're like, okay, let's rewrite everything. And, so.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that could have happened.
Yeah. So let's start with the characters. That's how we usually start because that's the only way you're going to know their names.
Exactly.
So actually, I don't know their names. I had to write them down. Well, I mean, the main star of the show is actually Margot Martindale, who plays Ruth Landry. She's like she's a really well-known American actress. I mean, I think if they stuck to this is based on a true story, right? Like,
But not really.
But not really.
Like, they
Yeah,
got
exactly.
the idea because there was actually a maple syrup heist a few years ago. But
Right.
this show and that actual story have nothing to do with each other, like, at all.
100%. So because obviously they wanted to make it into an English show, they had to make it like she was an American who was living in Quebec, and then obviously her family has ties to this Boston mob. Like, we don't really, that's not 100% clear. But I mean, Margot Martindale is really good usually in everything she's in, and she's good in this show. Like, I like the way she plays. Like, they need her because she's like the maple syrup expert. Like, apparently they can't do this heist without her because she understands how maple syrup business works, and it's not just stealing the stuff. They got to resell it. They got to store it. Like, there's all these considerations, right? And then you have, like you said, Remy Bouchard, who's like the security guard. He's the inside man. He's actually the one that came up with this plan in a sense. Like, the initial idea was like, he's the only security guard on this warehouse that's storing thousands of barrels of maple syrup that are worth millions of dollars, and he's the only security guard. So he knew from the start like how vulnerable this whole thing is to a theft. He is the best part of the show. He's the funniest of all the characters. And really, like, I really love all his time on screen. Like, he's quite a joy. And then the opposite of that is the guy Mike, who's the Boston mobster, or kind of mobster. This guy's clueless. Like, this guy, like, he's clueless. And, like, he just starts killing people. Like, right off the bat, he kills a guy, like, right at the beginning of the show.
Which, by the way, I didn't understand that. Why? They never explained why.
Well, because when Remy comes to him with the idea of stealing the maple syrup, he's like, yeah, it's me and this other guy. I forget his name. Like, they were the ones that had the idea. Like, because he was already stealing maple syrup, right? Like, this other guy, and like, sorry, I forget his name. He dies literally in the first scene of the show. He was like stealing maple syrup and paying Remy like a small, we're talking in the hundreds of dollars to like take a little bit of maple syrup, like black market style, right? So he decided, let's take what I'm doing now and just make it bigger. So Mike didn't want anybody else knowing about the big plan to steal all the millions of dollars of worth of syrup. So he killed the guy, which was completely stupid, right?
And then puts him in a barrel of maple syrup. Puts the body in there.
Like, the whole thing is stupid. Like, he's an idiot. Like, if he thinks he's some kind of master criminal, like, he's so dumb. Like, you could pull this off and include the guy. Like,
right, and it would have been easier because you actually needed another body, like a person.
But by killing him, now you've got a murder investigation, right? And the police are involved, and like, it's really like, well, I mean, it's a TV show, so it's not really well thought through. And then the last character that I want to mention was Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays Bo, who comes in near the end. I guess she's like the mob hitman or cleaner. Like,
Well,
someone
she's Mike's boss.
Yeah, she's sent to like clean up his mess. I mean, we think looks like she's dead, but I guess she's not, right? Like,
Well, that's the other thing I didn't understand. First, I was surprised
Yeah.
to even see her in the show because most of these actors are people that I haven't heard of. And then you see Jamie Lee Curtis, who's like a famous actress.
yeah.
So that was a little bit surprising to me because I thought this was like a low budget show. And then I thought she was dead, but all of a sudden she's walking around. Like, how does that happen?
It seemed impossible. Like, honestly, right? We all thought she was dead, right?
And speaking of things that I don't understand, you mentioned Ruth Landry. So her husband is basically on his deathbed,
Yeah.
but she insists on keeping him at home rather than taking him to the hospital. And they don't explain why.
Yeah, I don't get it either.
So I
I
didn't
mean, I guess
understand
maybe
that
she
either.
wanted. I guess maybe she just wanted to like be his caregiver, or like, I don't know. There's a connection with her husband and like the Boston mob. I guess like it's not really explained. That's like a lot of the show here. That's why it bothered me. Like, it seemed like there was too much. Like, was like, why is this happening? It was unclear. You know, there are some great moments though. Like, it's still pretty funny. Like, it's. I guess it's trying. I read online like people compare it to Fargo. I haven't watched the show Fargo. I watched the movie.
I like the movie Fargo a lot.
Yeah, but people are comparing it to Fargo in that it's like small-time criminals doing stupid stuff, right? And the kind of the problem is that Fargo is like what I would consider like a dark comedy, and this is just a stupid comedy. Like, this is like silly stuff that's happening, you know?
It's a good comparison between this and Fargo, so I agree with that. And I did think the show had some funny parts, like, you know, I was laughing at every episode, not the entire time, but at every episode.
Yeah.
But also, like at the end of each episode, I was excited to see the next. I couldn't wait to see the next episode. I'm like, what happens? You know, I was actually.
Yeah.
You know, and not many shows do that where it's like, oh, I can't wait to watch the next episode.
But do you feel that way after the last episode where it's leading into season 2? Like, can
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that there's a season 2 because I want answers to these questions.
I mean, I want answers too, but I mean, I can't guarantee you right now that I would even watch season 2. To be
Well, I
honest.
mean, if it's only 6 episodes and they're 30 minutes each, like you said, you
Yeah.
can watch it in a day.
Yeah. So speaking of like the funniest part, for me, the funniest like mini storyline in the whole thing is that Remy, the security guard, like everything's going bad, right? They've murdered his friend. They're literally in the forest with like a hit, like he's gonna kill the other security guard, Mike. Like they're on, like everything is going bad. The whole plan is going to hell. And his number one concern is, and he says it over and over, is that how could they have hired another security guard and make that guy my boss? Like, he's so hurt about like that he was passed over for like the promotion and like his role in this as a security guard. Like, he can't get it out of his head. He's like, like they're trying to kill the other guy, and he's like, I can't believe they hired him and they made him my boss. Like, that's his number one concern. I just found that very, very funny.
It is funny, but I also, like, if I was him, I'd be thinking the exact same thing because this guy was asking for them to hire more security for I don't know how long. And they kept ignoring him and they kept ignoring him. And then finally he said, screw this. Like, if they're not going to listen to me and I'm going to be the only security guard here, then I'm going to steal maple syrup.
Absolutely.
And then he like, they make the plan and everything's ready to go. And then all of a sudden, they finally hire another security guard. It's like,
So stupid.
if I'm him, I'm like, what am I going to do? I want to quit now. Or, you know, how do they hire this new guy and make him my boss?
Yeah, it
It's
is.
such
it is crazy.
it's such a dirty move.
I felt so bad for him, but the thing is, like, the guy who's in charge of the maple syrup
Yeah, cartel.
federation,
Yes, Leonard.
whatever it is, like, he's an idiot. Like
he is an
they
idiot,
make him
and
the
everyone
villain,
hates him.
obviously. Yeah, even his own son.
He backstabs his own son.
his
Like
own son,
he tells his
right?
son, you know what? No one likes me. I'm going to retire. You're going to take over and I'm going to announce it at the big, event that we have coming up. And then the big event comes up and he does the exact opposite. He throws his son under the bus and says that all the stuff he's been doing is because his son wanted it that way.
So bad, eh? So bad. I felt so bad for him.
I did too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny, actually. The son is pretty funny because he always says his title. He's like, I'm the manager of blah, blah, blah. He's so proud of his title. It's like those little quirks of the show are make it interesting.
I did like the interaction. We didn't talk about the two police officers, like the one from Quebec
they're
and then
good.
the one that comes in from Montreal to like take over the investigation because now it's a murder, so now it's more important. So they send this important detective, Valerie Nadeau, to come and take over. And basically she's just bossing everyone around and she doesn't even listen to the other police officer, the one who's been there all along, who knows everyone in the town. So that was a good interaction. Those scenes with the two of them I liked.
No, they were good. They were both very good. I had a note about I want to talk about the use of French in the show because there's quite a bit of French, right? Like anybody who, look, you know it and I know it, but most of our listeners probably don't realize, like here in Montreal, it's very, very normal. Like I worked in an office and it was very, very normal to have a conversation that switches back from English to French, in the same conversation. This is something that happens so regularly here that you don't even know. But the thing is where they are in rural Quebec somewhere in maple syrup lands, that doesn't happen. It's 100% French. Now I know that they have to make it English because it's obviously an English TV show, but I just found it weird that like Remy's dad speaks to him in French and he's swearing and there's all this whole French interaction and they switch to English. I'm like, oh my God, this would never happen. Just keep the subtitles on and let them have their conversation in French if you're going to show it in French. I that bothered me a little bit.
I wonder, and maybe you can do this on your settings, but there must be a French version of the show.
There probably is, but it's going to be dubbed, I guess, right? Because Margot Martindale and Jamie Lee Curtis are not speaking in French. Well, I mean, maybe theirs is in English. Yeah, there might be a French version of the show, yeah.
And the Boston mob guy, Mike, doesn't speak French either.
So as I was watching the show, like obviously it's filmed somewhere in rural Quebec, I guess.
Actually, apparently it's all filmed in Montreal.
Well, I realized that because there's the scene where the two cops are like trailing the van. They're both going to the same place at the same time. The van with the bad guys and the police are going, and then they need to stall the police, so they decide they're gonna try to like ruin
give them
their
a flat
car
tire.
Exactly. So they go to a restaurant. Have you ever been? As soon as I saw the restaurant, I'm like, oh, I know that place. I didn't 100% know the location. I thought it was a different location. But have you ever gone to that restaurant, Dick Ann's? Do you remember this hamburger place?
I've heard of it because I remember the commercials on the radio, but I've never actually been there.
Exactly. So when I saw this, I'm like, oh, that's a Dick Ann's, right? And then I'm like, I think I know where that is. It's like somewhere out east in Montreal. But then I looked it up, and it's actually in Laval. So I found that interesting because as soon as I saw the restaurant, I'm like, okay, I know where they are. I know what they're eating, So that was kind of cool. Yeah.
So it was filmed in Montreal, and I found out when doing research, it didn't take them very long to do the entire series. They started on March 20th, 2023, and they finished on May 12th, 2023. So
holy shit.
Less than 2 months to do the whole thing, which is unheard of.
I mean, it's almost all filmed in the same spots, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about funny scenes. So I think my favorite scene is it's either episode 1 or 2 where Ruth Landry, she's pissed off and she chops down a huge tree, attaches it to the back of her truck, drives like a maniac through the entire city, and somehow slams the tree into the front door of the, I don't know if it's the Maple Cartel office or whatever it is, the office where Leonard works, and causes all kinds of damage.
It's really good.
It's hilarious.
It's really good, actually. There's a lot of laugh out loud moments. That's why, like, my problem with the show is, like, I understand they want it to be like a comedy, but not exactly. But it's not. I just found it's not dark enough to be a dark comedy. It's more slapstick. It's kind of stupid, right?
Right.
So,
I wouldn't call it a dark comedy. I agree with you. But someone does die.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the guy gets killed right at the beginning, right? We know that.
And
then the other security guard is almost killed in the woods.
the other thing that bothered me was that Boston guy, Mike, frames Remy's father for the murder with the baseball bat that had blood on it. And then when the police come to question Remy's father, he just admits, he tells them, yes, I murdered him, even though he didn't.
Yeah, because he's trying to protect his own kid. This is like a,
Right.
yeah. I mean, we know he's.
But that was
he's
very
such a
frustrating for me.
He's such a nice guy, like Remy's dad. And his dad makes like, I want to say stuffed animals, but like they're literally actual animals that are like they were their pets.
Right.
So, another interesting thing about the show, did you catch all the famous songs at the end of some of the episodes, but sung in French versions?
Right. So I recognized all the songs and some classic songs, but yes, they've obviously changed the lyrics to French, which is not easy to do.
Yeah, they have I Got You, Babe, which in French is called Je t'aime trop toi. They have Knocking on Heaven's Door, which is Knock Knock Ouvre Porte d'Or. And they have These Boots Are Made for Walking, which is Ces bottes sont faites pour marcher.
It's impressive that they were able to do that.
It's good. I mean, there's lots of, like, people don't understand. Like, for me and you, seeing a lot of this kind of stuff, like, this is French-Canadian culture. This is how things are, Like, a lot of people will watch this and say, is this real? Like, is this, like, how it is up in Quebec,
So, the show is on Amazon Prime, and it's also, it's on Amazon Prime in the United States.
Of course,
I wonder how many Americans have watched this show. I wonder.
I don't know. Like, for me, the whole appeal of it was that it was a Canadian, more specifically a French-Canadian thing. So I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure, really. So I looked up the true story because I wanted to know, like, how true is this to the actual real maple syrup heist, which there's some similarities, but, like, I'm just going to read this part. So the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist was a theft in 2011 and 2012 of nearly 3,000 tons of maple syrup valued at more than 18 million Canadian dollars. They stole the maple syrup from, like, the maple syrup surplus facility, which is like how it is in the show. Did you know that Quebec maple syrup is 77% of the global maple syrup supply?
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised.
Right. So basically, in the real story, it's kind of similar in that the syrup was stored in unmarked metal barrels, and the thieves used trucks to transport barrels to a remote place where they siphoned off the syrup and refilled the barrels with water, which was what the original plan was in the show. And eventually, they just were stealing more and more, and they weren't even replacing the barrels, which is eventually how they got caught. So in December of 2020, police arrested 17 men related to the theft. And that's the actual story.
And 5 people were sentenced to jail.
Yes, exactly. I mean, their plan was kind of like the original plan that they had, because, let's steal the barrels, fill them with water, put them back, and no one's going to know, and like that kind of thing. But obviously in the show, things get crazy and things don't work out, right?
Right.
So, like, I know, again, you're not going to give it a rating. I would give it, like, 3 out of 5 maple syrup barrels. Like, that's what I think.
I had a feeling you were going to use maple syrup barrels as your
like, would I recommend it? Like, I would say yes, watch it, but, like, I don't think it's great, Like, the best thing about the show is that it's only 6 episodes, so it's easy, fast watch, right?
Right. I mean, yes, it's an easy watch. Is it going to be my favorite show of the year at the end of the year? No, it won't. But it, I enjoyed it.
Right. Okay. Very good. Really, very nice and good.
Okay, we'll be right back after this with some final thoughts.
You're listening to Unscripted.
Hey everyone, Skip here. I'm really excited to invite all of you to follow my new account at Skip Cooks on Instagram and TikTok. I'll be sharing my love of cooking with recipes in the form of 1-minute music videos, all set to some of my favorite songs. Don't miss out, follow me, and let's have some fun in the kitchen.
Unscripted with Skip and Josh is available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter and go to Facebook to like the show page. And now, some final thoughts from the guys.
All right, so I do have a couple of things here for the final thoughts that I wanted to mention to you.
Let's hear
I
'em.
actually started watching a new TV show called The Pitt. I don't know if you've seen the commercials for this.
I actually have, and it's Pitt double T, so it's about Pittsburgh, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it's a hospital show. It stars Noah Wiley, who was originally on ER way back when. He's not the same character. He's just a doctor in the show. He's the main character. And it's a medical drama. But there's two interesting things about it. First of all, it's like 24. Every episode is 1 hour in the emergency room. So like I'm on like episode 5 now or something, and it's like 12 o'clock, like the story continues exactly where it picked up last time. So some patients are still there. Some patients are still in the waiting room. Some patients are gone. Some are dead. Some, it's just continuing. So the same stories kind of continue. And then of course new patients come. So I am really enjoying The Pitt. Here in Canada, it's on, believe it or not, it's on USA Network, which we can get now. There's a version of USA Network for Canada, but it says it's a Max production, which is HBO. So I don't really, anyways, I'm not really sure. I think it's on Crave too here, but anyways, I do like it and I would recommend it. Now the other thing that's interesting is we know and are good friends with an emergency room doctor who lives in Pittsburgh, who works at a Pittsburgh emergency room. So I texted him. Like after like I watched a couple of episodes and I said, hey, by the way, I'm watching this show, The Pitt. Like, it's really quite good. Like, can you tell me like is the emergency room where you work like as chaotic as this? And he's basically like, no. He's like, no, it's not as chaotic as this. He goes, although it can be really chaotic if they have like a trauma or like someone's having like comes in like with a heart attack, or if there's like an accident. Like he says, sometimes there are like really stressful moments, but I think obviously it's a TV show. So I thought that was interesting because the first person I thought of when I saw the show is, our friend Sean. So
I know that the show is set in Pittsburgh, but is it actually shot in Pittsburgh?
Yes. I looked it up and it is shot in Pittsburgh, but weirdly, it doesn't have to be because everything that happens in the show so far takes place in the hospital, in the emergency room. That emergency room set could literally be anywhere, right? There are some outside shots of the hospital, but again, that could be anywhere. Like we really haven't seen any Pittsburgh in the show. Maybe it's coming, but I did look it up on IMDb and it did say it was filmed in Pittsburgh. So I thought that was kind of weird because it didn't really seem like it had to be. But
you love those medical shows. You love them.
I mean, I started watching this show with my wife, and after the first 2 episodes, she's like, I'm not going to watch this anymore. So I just kept, she's not watching, but I watch it still. So I thought it was good.
I recall like a few months ago during the Christmas holidays, I had like a free preview of USA Network.
Yeah.
I don't think I have it anymore. And so I watched USA Network for like an hour because I had a free preview, and I may have watched like 5 minutes of this show.
Right. So the second thing I wanted to tell you is really a funny interaction that happened to me. You're going to like this. I went to see my daughter's boyfriend's hockey game.
Okay, you've gone to see his games before, I think.
Yeah. He happened to be playing at an arena that's like literally 2 minutes from my house. So we went like on a Saturday night before we went out for dinner. We went to see his game. So like I sit down with my wife and my daughter next to us, and then a bunch of like the friends always sit together. Like there's the friends of the players that come, right? The girlfriends and some of the friends, and they're sitting there too. So these 2 guys come, and clearly they're like friends of the kids who are playing, and they sit down, and he turns around and he sees Selena, and obviously he knows her, and he says hi to her, and then he looks at me and Diane, and he kind of like, I guess he assumes we're her parents. Like he's not, I don't know what he's thinking, but he looks at me. And he turns around, and then he looks back over his shoulder because he's sitting right in front of us, and he looks at me and he's like, hey, I follow you on TikTok.
Seriously?
I was like, you do? I was like, what? Excuse me? It was like, honestly, like one of the funniest things like that could have ever happened to me. It was just absolutely incredible.
That's pretty funny. But like, how does he know you to follow you? Is there a connection, or he just followed you because he followed you?
No, I think because my cooking TikToks, a lot of my followers are like my daughter's friends. And then he's like a friend of a friend. So like, I guess he eventually saw me, right? So I thought it was super funny. It was just super fun. My wife, I couldn't believe it. My wife looked at me. She's like, oh my God.
So like what you just described, that happens to our friend Joe all the time. And so now you're just a notch below Joe now.
I'm a notch. I'm several hundred notches below. Yes. Yes.
And it actually happened to me once because, Joe did that show about me many years ago.
Yeah. People knew you.
And I walked into a bar one time to meet Joe, and all of his buddies that he used to play hockey with were there. And so then I saw this guy, like I never met the guy before.
Yeah.
So I didn't know him. And then he saw me and he came up to me. He's like, hey, I saw your show.
Exactly. It's so good. Eh? It's so funny.
It was pretty funny.
All right. Well, it was awesome talking to you about the show The Sticky, and I'll talk to you next time.
Have a great week.